Okay, let's talk about Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is about communication, especially in the workplace for this class. With communication, you'd think about, well, that we all take it for granted what communication is. So when you look at the definition of communication, it is the process of a sender sending a message to a receiver with the purpose of creating a mutual understanding. Well, the most important part of that definition is the last part. The last part, the purpose of creating a mutual understanding. Communication is no good unless both parties understand what is the message. So a lot of times it's real important that you think, well, does the other person understand what I'm saying? And a lot of times you think about it and you think, well, they didn't really understand it because the job isn't done right. So I got a question for you, just on a little bit of different thought. What would you do if you went to work and your supervisor told you that you were going to be in a room or working on a vehicle with no one around and you're not allowed to talk all day? I don't know about you, but I would have a real difficult time with that. Communication comes natural and more natural to some of us, but most people communicate on a daily basis or on an hourly or half hour or whatever. You communicate a lot. So it's really important that you learn to communicate properly. So there's two major types of communication in the workplace. The first one is formal communication. And if you look at a organization chart, such as this organization chart, I'm going to make this larger. The formal communication would be like the president of this company sending a message to the executive assistant about how they want technology to be handled. This is a formal organization. It follows the organizational chart. Or if you wanted to send, say you were on this help desk, and you wanted to send a message to your boss, the VP of technology, you would do it via memo or letter or something like this. You're following the chain of command. That is your formal communication. The other type of communication is informal. Informal is something like discussions in the lunchroom by coworkers, like say Angelica and Ian, are in the lunchroom and they're talking about something that is going on, not necessarily about work. It could be rumors, it could be things that are going on with their families, it could be gossip, it could be anything like that. It could even be discussion about changes that are coming up in the company. So policy changes. It is not formal. It is informal because it is just discussions amongst coworkers. So say these VPs are out to lunch and they're talking about changes that are going on. It's verbal. It's just talking. Or maybe they have a gossip about something about another VP. Something like that are informal. There's different forms of communication. And I'm going to close this one so I get back here. Different forms of communication are like phone calls. You've got the call, you're being notified of something that is happening. Text, email, discussions in person. Presentations, yes, that's a form of communication. A PowerPoint presentation, they are communicating information to you. Letters, and then you've got nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is just as critical as verbal communication. The reason that I say that is nonverbal communication says a lot. And it's how you stand or sit. Say I was sitting like this and I'm trying to talk to you and I'm all crumpled over. Well, that's not going to do any good. Or I'm moving around. And when I'm moving around, what does that tell you? That I'm not comfortable in what I'm doing. So eye contact or lack thereof, if I was doing this video and I continually am looking to the side here, it looks like I am so distracted. My facial expressions, say I go, oh gosh, and I just sort of droop and I look like I'm mad. That's really definitely. What about using my hands? Some of us, and me included, sometimes when I'm doing videos, I have a really hard time because I am a hand user when I speak. Sometimes that's really hard. Texting while you're being talked to. I can't find my phone right now, but I had my phone here. Here it is. Say I'm talking to you, and here I am trying to text. Well, first of all, I've got it up in front of my face, so you can't see me, right? How frustrating is that? How close you are. In today's environment, with everything going on in today's society, people are not going to let you get real close. You don't want to enter their comfort zone. If you're interested in it, Google, what is a good comfort zone during discussions? Okay, the silence. What about if I do this to you? Isn't that a form of communication? If I sit there and am completely silent, that's a major form of communication. My husband always said that he knew when I was upset when I go silent. I'm better about it now. I don't do it as much now, but I was a real good user of the silent treatment. Okay, there's 3 levels of listening. I'm sorry. The non-listening. Well, that pretty well explains itself, right? Non-listening is when you really ignore somebody that's talking to you. Once again, my husband is real good at this. How many of us do that to our spouses? Or, to our significant others? Or if there's someone that you just don't care what they're doing, you really don't listen. And then there's passive listening. You pretend to listen, or you only really hear part of what is said. And then there's active listening. You're attentive, you're empathetic, you understand what people are saying. And one of the ways you can really tell the other person that you're listening is somehow or another repeat something that they said so they see that you understand. So there's many other things. There's barriers to communication. What are some of the major barriers? Language of the other person. The language, one of 2 things. Either you speak a different language or they have an accent that you don't understand. So you may have to ask for clarification. People talking around you, or when I'm doing these videos, if it hasn't happened yet, it probably will. You will hear my dog barking in the background. He is a barker. And that can really, really distract you. What about if there is a strong smell around you? It just is a barrier to your communication, especially if it's the other person. Offensive words. There are some people who, when they talk, their language is so offensive that their message gets lost. So you may have to tell them, I really don't appreciate the language. Can you soften it for me? Okay, so that you get their message. Personal issues in your life that you're thinking of, that can really, really cause an issue. Cultural differences, and a lot of times, it's the way things are said or who is saying things. And you probably just heard a distraction. My phone buzzed. I just turned it on to silent. What about the gender of the other person? Sometimes Men have a tendency to shut out women. Sometimes women have a tendency to shut out men. It just depends upon the person. What about an eye roll? If someone rolls their eyes at you, do you really think that they are going to communicate with you well, or you're going to listen? What about, there's another one that is very, very common now. If you're on a cell phone, or if the other person is on a cell phone and they have you on a speakerphone, or they're in the hills or something like that, and the phone quality is very bad, that is major, major barrier. So all of these are barriers to communication, and you've got to break down the barriers before you can do appropriate communication. So that's mostly with verbal and when you're up next to someone. When you have written communication, there are things you need to do. You need to choose your words wisely. Don't use the terms honey or cops or hey you. There's another one. We have been told that we really should not use the term, as teachers, we should not use the term you guys, because that could be very discriminatory at times. So the little things, be careful of it. Avoid unnecessary words. I was on a video meeting the other day, and I tell you that meeting could have been 15 minutes, but it was 45 because the same thing was said over and over again. And people that were asking questions that had already been asked. So I had a tendency to shut down. And I started talking to someone who I was with that I needed to get something done. And I missed some because I thought it was just going to be a repeat. So that can really be careful. Avoid unnecessary words. Not only face-to-face or over video or phone, but also in writing. You will lose your audience if you don't. Proofread your documents. Very, very important. Words spelled different ways mean different things. So run your spell checker. Make sure you are saying what you mean. And avoid abbreviations in written communication. We all know what LOL means or some of the other abbreviations, but there are those people who don't. So don't isolate out that audience. So be careful, because people interpret communications differently. You need to make sure that your documentation is clear, whether it be to document an issue that's going on in work, and you need to answer 4 questions. Who, when, where, and why. If you don't answer all of those, your documentation is going to be questionable. You need to make sure that you have all of that. Have you ever thought about voicemails? Or on my cell phone, my son came to me one time and he told me, he says, Mom, do you really, really know that message that you sent me, what it said? Did you look at it again? I had done a video message, and on that message, I let the phone spell the words for me. That message was so bad. He had no idea what I was trying to say. As a matter of fact, had I not sent the message myself, I wouldn't know what I had said. So you've got to be very, very careful. This can also be on your voicemails. Be careful. First of all, make sure that you know who you're sending it to. You're not sending a voicemail to someone you don't know, because you may have misdialed. Make sure that you have the correct number. Think about something. When you're done communicating, you need to be able to answer a question. Was your discussion or your communication effective or ineffective? Effective means you both understand what the message was and the message was correctly understood by both parties. Ineffective just means the opposite. Someone did not understand what was being said. So your ineffective does not solve the last part of that definition, which is, once again, the purpose of creating mutual understanding. And what happens in a conversation when the conversation breaks down? Think about that. If the conversation breaks down, the purpose, whatever it is, whether you were training someone, or trying to get a message across, you have not done it. So try to make sure if you see the conversation breaking down, stop your conversation, start over, and make sure the other person is understanding. So, okay, I'm going to let you go on with your work. As you can see here, there's a lecture chat, which you have seen on some of the others, some of the other modules, and you can read the instructions on it when you open this up. Then there's study guide questions for you to do, and you need to observe a communication in process. When you click on this, and please take a look at this. Very important. This is worth 50 points. So do it. Make sure that you answer all of these questions. It's for you to observe an interaction, a communication, and answer all of these questions about that communication. So take a look at it, take some time in doing it, and I'm going to let you start doing your work for Chapter 9. I'll see you in Chapter 10.